Hello everyone, this is Daniel and welcome to another quick video. So of course I wanted to publish the next part of my tutorial series today. However, this week has been a little bit busier than usual and I was not able to make it on time. So instead of leaving you without any content, I decided to instead take you on a quick tour, on a quick preview of what I want to cover in the next video. I think that the result so far is already quite exciting, and I can share with you already sort of the techniques that I've been using just in a simple quick preview. And then for next week I'll be trying to add some additional details and to make it all a bit clear. So here's the scene, that the current state of the project, and this is what it looks like in preview. And I want to show you how exactly I went about achieving this result. So let me quickly get this out of the way. Let us look only at the top here. So first of all, I want to mention that I base my style mostly off this tutorial here, by a version of reality. It's a very nice approach, and it's not the first time that I've heard about it, but I think that this video describes the process very well in a lot of detail. So if you feel like giving it a shot with just this information here, definitely take a look at this video. I recommend it a lot. So you can see that, for example, I have my front hair in this group. This hair is, if we go to the modifiers and if we disable them for a second, you know, it's a flat piece of geometry. But what I'm doing here is I deform it through a lattice. That's the main thing. And if we look at this lattice object, which is sort of a deformer, this one, you see that the deformer is bent, and it's really bent to this shape of the head. So the first thing that I'm using here is a curve modifier to first get the profile right. So there is a curve. I should maybe unhide that too, somewhere in here. Let's see. So here's the curve, and with this I can now sort of modify the profile. And then the next modifier is a simple deformer, which, you know, just lets you bend around some origin, for example. But the problem with only those two is that, you know, no hair is that perfectly uniform. There's always going to be, you know, some distortion here and there. So I'm using another lattice that modifies my lattice, and that gives me the result that you can see here. And now modeling the hair can be very difficult in this position, so what I'm doing is, let's see, I have a copy of this same object. It's a linked copy though, so if you go into the mesh panel, this data block is the same as this one here. So if I make any changes on this end, let's just make this long for a second, you see that as soon as I exit edit mode, it will reflect this side. And that is about it really for the approach that I took. There are a few other things that I want to share though. Let's take a look at the materials. I'm using 3 materials mainly. One that is shaded, so, you know, if we look at the rendered view, one is a material that can be light or dark, one is a material that can only be dark, and I'm using that in these flat areas here on the side. And there is my outline material. I'm creating the outline, by the way, by using the inverted Hall method. So I have a solid V modifier with a sort of low thickness. Make sure the offset is right, but most importantly you have to flip the normals and set the material index offset. And then if you take a look at the material, there's backface culling activated. That allows us to actually look through this layer because we're looking through the... It's difficult to explain. I guess I would have to go on a whole tangent about normals to explain how this works, but it's a very important setting. And the same thing applies basically for the other parts. The back of I separated my head into 3 parts, by the way. There is the back, the front, and this sort of middle section. The back is actually a copy of the front, which I modified to, let me just disable the parts that I don't need. So the back is the same as the front, just with some modified curves and some modified settings. It takes quite some time to really get it into shape, but this is what it looks like done. And you can see that even the mesh here is actually the same as here, if you really look closely, but it doesn't really matter. Finally, there's this middle section, and I had a little bit of a struggle here because it's very difficult to mirror this process, because I actually wanted to mirror this mesh right at the beginning and apply the lattice in a mirrored way, but that doesn't work. And if I mirror it after deforming it, then it's very difficult to have these 2 parts merge in the middle. So what I had to do in the end is to remove the faces here in between, so that the outline would not show up. You see, it ends here, and that means that my outline also ends here. It is a bit of a workaround and not the cleanest solution, but at least it works, and I hope that in the future maybe I can find a better way. And finally, there's 2 more things I think you might be interested in. First of all, let's take a look here at my custom normals. So I've received a question that you wanted me to explain custom normals in more detail, what normals even are and so on. And I want to do that, but for this video I'm not going to talk about it too much. I just want you to know that I took a few different approaches. I was planning on creating sort of let's see, like a rough version of the entire shape and to just copy the normals from this object. However, that turned out to be not as consistent as I was hoping it to be, so I am copying, for example, only 50% of the normals from that object for the front part, even less for another part, and in the back I ended up not copying it at all, but somehow this ended up giving me a really nice result. Even, let me turn the light around, for example. Even if we move the light around, this line is quite continuous, and I was happy with it in this way. But maybe there's some space to improve it, so I'll look into that again for the future. So then there's one last thing I think you might want to know, and that is what the material setup looks like exactly. So let's take a quick look at that as well. First of all, let me show you the simple materials first. The outline is just an emission material. The flat part, so the shaded part, these parts here, are also just a darker color. The only thing you have to make sure is that the outline has backface culling enabled. And then finally, for the hair shader, it looks somewhat like this. I'm using just a diffuse. I'm using the color ramp to apply colors to it. You could also do it a bit more smarter to make this black white and then multiply it with some colors that would give you more like chances to customize the colors easily. But anyways, that's what I chose. And finally, there's one more thing I just realized. The shadows have been a real challenge because Eevee is kind of limited in its way of calculating shadows. So I have contact shadows and shadows on in my case. These are my settings. I found some settings that ended up working somehow, but yeah, if you have trouble with that, I can totally understand. I found that spotlights have a lot better shadows. Let's see. I think I have to turn up the brightness a bit more. The shadows for spotlights are usually sharper, but it's kind of an annoying workaround that you always have to now make sure that your spotlight properly points at the object, so it's not ideal. Anyways, this is what the character looks like at the moment, and next week I would like to talk more about all of the things that I mentioned today, just in more detail, and I will be sharing again the time-lapse of when I created this as usual. It was a process of over 5 hours, I think, so it's very hard to summarize that all very nicely, which contributes to why I wasn't able to do it for this week. But anyways, I hope that with this video you got a pretty good idea for the moment what you really need to maybe even go ahead and try these techniques on your own project. And next video I'll be back and we can take a closer look at the details. So I'm looking forward to showing you all those things next week, and I hope to see you then soon.